As the tempest in the teapot over John Boehner's reelection as Speaker captures a good bit of media attention, I thought it would be useful to talk to you about perspective, preparation, and prophetic punch.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
Welcome to the program, friend. At the time of this taping, it looks like Boehner will be reelected as Speaker due to the constraints that we have for editing time, putting it up onto the satellite, and then bringing this show down into your home. We simply can't do this in real time. This is the day for the vote. I apologize. We'll be talking more about this tomorrow. It looks like Boehner's going to be reelected. However, it's really exciting to me to see this group of men and hopefully a few women who are saying, no, we will not vote for John Boehner because John Boehner has betrayed us. John Boehner is part of the problem. John Boehner is taking us down paths that are ultimately going to lead to the economic collapse of America, our inability to repay our debt, us being overrun by illegal aliens. People like me, of course, are saying, and hopefully people like you are saying, that the blood of the innocent that is on Boehner's hands and that is on the hands of most Americans because of the abortion holocaust, that is going to put us in grave danger with the Almighty. So, whatever way you slice it, John Boehner is part of the problem. John Boehner has helped take us over the cliff. Now, maybe the Democrats want us to go over the cliff at 100 miles an hour and the Republicans want us to go over the cliff at 80 miles an hour. We're still going off the cliff. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. This is a chance for you to step back and to assess what is going on in America right now in the light of history. And if I could use this moment to transport us back in time, perspective, I'd like to talk about the first slaves arriving in America. Depending on what history account you read, the first slaves may have come to Jamestown when the colony was introduced. It's not sure, the people aren't sure if they were indentured servants or if they were true slaves. Then one account says that the Dutch were the first to bring them in 1619. The point is this: there were surely bondmen, people who were crying out to God against the iniquity of their slavery for well over 200 years before the start of the Civil War. And in the early 1700s, the slave trade, and by that we mean the kidnapping of men, women, and children, and then transporting them on those horrific slave ships, those little cubicles that were like coffins, that they would chain them in those boxes and bring them to America. The slave trade where they would go by and pour a little bit of gruel and water into their mouths while they were transported, while they were puking and they were defecating and urinating all over themselves and on their neighbor. And day by day, the slave traders would go and see who was dead and then just take their body and throw it overseas, throw it overboard. All right? This was what was going on. And then bringing them here and selling them like cattle or oxen. This was a horrific sin against God. But think with me about the long-suffering patience of God and the time that it takes to reap a full harvest for an iniquity of such a horrific magnitude. Whether you want to look at 150 years or you want to look at 250 years of American slavery. From our perspective today, where we can go to a McDonald's and get everything really fast, that's a long time, right? That's a long time. But it all piled up. It all piled up. And then that first shot at Fort Sumter was heard. Then the Civil War began in earnest. And then the judgment of God rolled out across the fruited plain. And as Abraham Lincoln rightly prophesied and spiritually spoke, he said that all of those years of unrequited toil was lost. All the blood and the treasure of the Civil War was basically a payback for the abuse and the blood and the unrighteous treasure that was acquired from the slaves. So as we look at this Boehner election and the fight against him, the small group of people, have perspective of how long it took for the judgment of God to come for slavery. And when we come back from this break, I want to talk to you about the perspective that we should have for now and the danger that we're in. So it's perspective, preparation, and prophetic punch. And maybe we'll take a quick look at David Walker. Don't go away.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah.
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
My wife and I were talking this morning before I started the show, and she said, Randall, make sure you tie this all together. Make sure people grasp what it is you're trying to say. 'Cause I'm trying to give you a pretty big plate full of spiritual thought, intellectual and philosophical thought, and I want to do a good job, so stay with me. When you look at the perspective, the distance, the time of what happened from the first slaves being brought to America to the start of the Civil War, you had so many different things going on. For example, in the North, the abolitionist movement took off in earnest in the 1820s and 1830s. And at the beginning, there was anti-slavery societies that existed throughout the country, even in the South. But in the South, it was more of an educational thing, and it was, gradually over time, maybe we can send the slaves to Haiti, maybe we can send them back to Africa, maybe the federal government will reimburse slave owners for their slave. There was no urgency. There was no sense of, this is a crime against God, and we are going to pay a horrific price for the sin of man-stealing, of kidnapping men, women, and children, and then forcing them to be our slaves. That was absent. Then along came what became known as the abolitionists, all right? The abolitionists came forward, and they began to denounce slavery in the fiercest of terms. They began to say that the Constitution was a covenant with hell. William Lloyd Garrison, probably the most famous leader of the abolitionist movement, called for the immediate, unconditional release of all slaves. Well, at that point, it became, slowly but surely, a focal point of political powers in the South and the North to silence this opposition. Did you know that before the start of the Civil War, It was against the law to send or to distribute anti-slavery literature in the slave-holding states. It was a crime to spread anti-slavery literature in the South. Did you hear of the Fugitive Slave Act, which was passed not just with Southern votes, but Northern votes, which made it a federal crime to help a slave gain freedom in Canada? The Underground Railroad is a very famous part of abolitionist history, where slaves were taken secretly through or from slavery in the South through the northern states and then to freedom in Canada. Thousands of slaves ultimately got their freedom that way. Well, the slaveholders and their counterparts in the North, like John Boehner today, okay, like Mitch McConnell today, and yes, in case you're wondering, I'm trying to make the connection, and without equivocation and without apology, that John Boehner and Mitch McConnell are like the northern politicians who cut deals with the devil in the South, which helped lead toward the Civil War. So the northern puppets, the northern, we want to get along, the northern, this is just business, the northern, well, we want to uphold the law, politicians helped pass the Fugitive Slave Act, which made it a federal crime for people in the North, or anywhere for that matter, to help a fugitive slave escape. You had, in the 1930s, a young black man from Massachusetts release a book called An Appeal. It became known as David Walker's Appeal. In the appeal, nearly 30 years before the outbreak of the Civil War, he prophesied the Civil War. Literally spoke of God stirring up sons and brothers and fathers and sons to fight against each other as a recompense for the blood that was shed, for the lives that were stolen, for the evil of that bondage. He prophesied. And at the time, all this was going on, there were bounties put out on the head of David Walker, of William Lloyd Garrison. At one point, there was a contingent of people that had a warrant for David Walker or for William Lloyd Garrison's arrest, and he actually fled to Europe for a season. There was a bounty on his head, $5,000 dead or alive. That would be like $500,000 today, okay? Just so you grasp the significance of the danger that it was, or that it entailed to speak and to fight against the evil of slavery, and the fact that northern politicians like John Boehner and Mitch McConnell today helped the southern butchers and merchants of slavery. So think of that time, that distance, and then think of what happened. And that's what I want to talk about when we come back, preparation. Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today. If my memory is correct, Daniel Webster, who was a senator, also was involved in cutting the deal for the Fugitive Slave Act. There were Christian people, people who professed faith in Jesus Christ as their Lord and their Savior and would have gone to evangelical meetings, okay, who sided with the Southern slaveholders to make it a federal crime to try and rescue a black slave. The Southern Baptist Convention, the Southern Baptist denomination, as you probably recall, a few years ago, repented publicly for their public support of slavery during the antebellum period of American history. It was so deep, the sin of slavery was so deep, that there were Christian ministers who had slaves. That's how bad it was. Just like today, where various Methodist or Episcopalian or Presbyterian or Baptist leaders, ministers, are saying that a woman's right to choose is in our Constitution, and that it's the law of the land, and that it's her right before God, and it's up to her and her conscience and her God and her minister to decide. This is evil of the highest order, more evil than the evil of slavery. Because remember, a slave could at least escape. A slave could fight. Some of them did escape. Some of them did fight. A baby can't fight. A baby cannot escape. A baby cannot even cry for help or mercy. A baby is just butchered and thrown into a landfill or into a sewer to be consumed by rats and vermin. It's a crime against God, what we have going on in America today, far worse than the crime of slavery. And people like John Boehner and Mitch McConnell hold as much guilt or maybe more than people like Obama because they profess to be against the killing of babies, and yet they sustain the Holocaust with their votes, with their budgets, with the people that they confirm to the U.S. Supreme Court, and on goes the list. Not to mention the homosexual juggernaut. Not to mention the abuse of parental rights, of the distribution of birth control to our sons and daughters in public schools when we as parents don't even know about it. I mean, if you want to look at the crimes against God, against families, against babies, against marriage, the list is getting pretty long, people. And the reason I spoke about perspective is because whether you mark the date of slavery as 1607 or 1619 or the early 1700s, the point is it was a long time. And those sins began to pile up. But there was a payday. There was a day when that debt of sin was going to be paid. Not just by the blood of Jesus, no, but by the blood of American soldiers, by the loss of treasure and blood. That sin, that reaping what was sowed was going to happen. And so that's why I want to just talk about preparation. The people who were prophetic in America, whether in the North or the South, primarily in the North, prior to the war, kept warning, judgment is coming. We will pay for this. They were right. And we need to be ready. And we need to understand that judgment is coming. And if you want to jump all the way back to the Old Testament and look at the prophetic warnings that were given, like say through Jeremiah. Jeremiah prophesied for decades that Jerusalem would be destroyed. I mean, after a while, you would have people around just mocking him, saying, ha! A man talking to his boy saying, I came and heard Jeremiah saying this when I was a boy. Now you're a boy and he's still out there saying it. What a lunatic. But Jeremiah was right. And the prudent, the wise see danger approaching and prepare for it. The fool passes on and suffers. So if we see the danger approaching, it's a whole nother show what it means to be prepared. But it means to be prepared spiritually as much as possible, to be prepared economically as much as possible, to have plans what you would do with this or that situation for your children. The wise man sees danger approaching and prepares. Okay? You can go on our website and you can look at different shows that we've done on what it would mean to be prepared if all hell breaks loose in America. But the point I want to leave you with before I finish on with my last segment is this. There will be hell to pay for what we have done. There will be. And we can thank John Boehner and Mitch McConnell and their cohorts in part for the disasters that are going to befall us. I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years. And sadly, we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy. We have put together what we call an online university for you. Now that's a highfalutin way of saying that we have a pretty significant library of material, books, tapes, videos that are there for you for free. Why are we doing this? Because America is desperate for new leaders, and because this material could help you to become the leader that you and God want you to be. Check it out and enjoy it. Perspective, preparation, prophetic punch. To be willing right now to say the truth when the truth is less and less popular, and knowing that the speaking and the declaration of the truth can at times avert some of the judgment of God and prepare other people for it and hopefully mitigate God's judgment. I mean, think of Jonah going to Nineveh and prophesying that Nineveh would be destroyed. And the king and the great men and the lowly men and women, what did they do? They tore their garments. They fasted for 3 days. They begged God for mercy. And God heard their cry. He had mercy on them. There are other times in the scriptures, such as in the life of Gideon, where the people groaned and they cried out. And finally, God delivered them from the Midianites. There is going to be judgment coming. I'm convinced of that. I don't see how there couldn't be, given the economy of God, given the laws of God. But some of it could be mitigated. But that depends on us having that prophetic punch, saying the truth, acting out on the truth, calling people like Mitch McConnell and John Boehner and others to accountability. Clearly, obviously, calling Obama and all of them, but people. One of the reasons I'm so excited about what's going on with this fight against Boehner is even though it's a tempest in a teapot, or even though it's a small group of people, it signals the beginning, could be the beginning, of enough Republicans, pro-life people, God-fearing people, people who profess Christ as Lord, saying, look, we've had it. We've had it with your lies. We've had it with your deception. We've had it with your treachery. We've had it with you taking us down a path of iniquity and bondage and murder and the subjugation, or rather the defamation and the attack on marriage. We've had it with you people. And if enough of a resistance and prophetic punch can emerge, perhaps God will see from heaven and will mitigate and have mercy on us from his tender, sacred heart, the tender, sacred heart of Jesus, the merciful heart of Jesus. Please, Lord, have mercy on us. So my question to you is, will you be a part of that prophetic punch? Will you say the truth like William Lloyd Garrison did, like Levi Coffin did, like the Underground Railroad people did in the 1800s? And maybe God will have mercy on us if we speak out. Maybe God will mitigate his judgment in certain pockets of the country. Jeremiah said that. He sends rain on one field and withholds it from another. So I don't know what's going to happen, people, but I'm telling you right now, the Boehner battle is just a little symptom of something that's far bigger, far greater that's going on. And we've got to have the courage to see it, to prepare for it, and to prophesy it, to declare it, and then leave the results in the hands of God.